What is going on, everybody? I'm your boy Retro Bliss, and you are on Retro Bliss Rewind. And I've got my buddies with me here, Bubsy and Bubsy. If you guys are new to the program, we'll talk about that here in a minute. But anyway, we're going to be talking about retro gaming handhelds, and there are a plethora of retro gaming handhelds, and we are by no means going to be able to talk about all of them tonight. And but we're going to talk about the early gen tonight. But without further delay, let's just bring our guests in here. First of all, let's get Mike, which is my Ed McMahon, to the show. And here is Brian from BD RetroMods, my Doc Severson. What's going on, fellas?
Hey.
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. We're going to have a good time tonight. We have a lot of props tonight. We have a whole lot of props tonight. So it's going to be a really good show. We welcome you guys to join the comments and to share your thoughts on these wonderful devices that we have. Before we do, I do have a video that I do want to share. So without further delay, let's go with the video, okay? Let's do this.
What? Hey, close the door. Hey, whoa, hey, what's going on? Oh, hey, what are you doing? What's going on here? Oh, dude. What's she doing? What's that white stuff? Hey, what's that? All that? What's that powder? It's so fluffy. Look at it. Hey, guys, what the where's Steve going? Hey, put me down. Put me down. I don't like stop it. Where are they taking Steve? Put me down. Quit swinging me through the. Huh? Oh my God! No, he just killed Steve! No, not me! No, I'm too young to die! That's it! I'm out of here! I'm jumping! I'm jumping! No, don't do it! No, don't jump! Oh no! Make her stop! She's a killing machine! Hey, what is that? Hey, Peter!
Happy birthday, Brian!
Happy birthday, Brian.
Thanks. Here, I thought that was going to sneak by a little bit. Guess not.
Nope. Nothing gets by us on here on Retro Bliss Rewind. Happy birthday, buddy.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Are you one? Are you two?
I was looking for something kind of cool. I don't know. That was probably kind of stupid, but I thought
it was good. I'm not going to lie. At first, I'm like, where is this video going? In relation to tonight's topic.
Yeah, what did these eggs have to do with retro gaming handhelds? All right, well
when I play mobile games.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have an itinerary, and so I'm going to turn it over to Mike. Mike's going to talk about the Microvision.
Well, actually, you were going to start by saying,
"Oh no.
Kind of things."
Yeah, there's a couple things I do have to say. I'm sorry. You're right. Thanks for keeping me on track. Before we go, like I said at the onset, there's no way that we're going to be able to talk about everything on the show tonight, and that includes some of the very, very early gen stuff, like the Game & Watch, and what's that you have there that you were talking about?
Well, these are like the little Tiger Electronics things
yeah,
from the 80s.
That kind of thing. And like this thing here, like the Coleco electronic quarterback, things like that. We're not going to be talking about those kind of things tonight. But what I want to know from you guys, if you guys are interested in having a show dedicated to those kind of handhelds, then let us know, and we will definitely consider doing a show on those. But tonight's show will not be on those type of devices. We're going to be a little later gen tonight. So
I wouldn't even say later gen. We're just focusing on the ones that have, they're not just a single game locked to a unit. It's like you've got different cartridges or cards or whatever, but you can play a whole pile of different games on them.
Yeah.
Mainly the 8 and 16-bit portables.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to it, Mike. You're up.
All right. So.
Well, I took you away. And I meant to do this.
Now I'm on. Oh, there we go. That's better.
Sorry. Technical
So the first
difficulties.
The first one that qualifies for that is the Microvision. So this is the this came out in 1979. This is the first mobile system that had cartridges, interchangeable games, and this is the base unit. And you might think to yourself, that doesn't look really much like a video game, but every game came like this. So you had things like you had Star Trek Phaser game, you had this is pinball, you had like a breakout style game, you had bowling style games. This is the game, and what it gave you is a little overlay to go over the screen and gaps in the plastic that would allow you to press this down here. And what you would do is whatever game you wanted to play, you'd click in, and now Pong style controls at the bottom, and these are your buttons, and you'd play like that on this little LCD screen. So that was the kind of very first mobile unit. And if I'm not mistaken, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were actually involved at a lower level in this.
Really?
Yep.
Wow,
Microvision.
that is really cool. That's really cool. All right, well, guess you're up now, Brian. Let's go. You're going to be talking about the Game Boy. Everybody knows about the Game Boy.
Oh yeah, everyone knows about this one. So obviously, yeah, we got the Game Boy from
I
1989.
got the box if you want to see the box.
And okay, yep. And but yeah, so we got the Game Boy and from 1989 that revolutionized gaming in the bathroom, and many hours of Tetris, there. So, but no, I mean, obviously it revolutionized it, because prior to that, we had like things like Mike showed, but then for the really in the early 80s, there mid 80s, the Tiger electronic handhelds were the big thing, and then we finally had a Game Boy, and how can you forget the now again, mine is a modded, screen.
Oh, of course,
but,
you got a backlight.
Yeah, yep. But you got to have the Game Boy, to play yourself some Bubsy 2. So
He's got Bubsy also. I knew he was going to try to figure that in.
That's right. Yep, and that's exactly right, Game Freak. But no, I mean, this really kind of revolutionized it, and again, for its time, and it's still a fun one to go back to and play. I mean, and I know a lot of people kind of ridicule, the monocolor, spinach green screen, and then you had, different revisions that kind of changed the color of it some, but it was really our first experience to get those console games we all loved and enjoyed in a handheld format that we could take in the back seat of a car or the bathroom or wherever and play it. And at the time when this came out too, TVs, you didn't have a whole bunch of TVs in your house in many cases. This was a time period where you still only had maybe one TV in the house. And so again, this was a way, because, again, trying to share a TV with a family, that you can just go in your room and play this for hours on end. And, battery life isn't too bad on it. I mean, I think it's about 8 hours, give or take, on 4 AA's. So, I mean, I think they made a lot of smart decisions with those. So, and it was at a good price point, and obviously it took off.
Okay. All right. Well, this
Phil,
one,
you could switch to all of us. I tried to send you a note in a few different places. For the first show, have us full screen, but then maybe come back to the 3 so we can all talk about the console.
Yeah.
Here's one person talking about it, and now here's another person talking.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that makes sense.
We'll do our show and tell, and then we'll come back to this. And
I'm learning. I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's fair.
Okay.
That's fair.
It's hard to be the producer and the host. So
I was just saying, it's like the box art for the Game Boy was bloody awesome. Like all that.
Well, and even the commercials when it was like that robotic type guy playing with the kid.
Oh yeah,
on
yeah,
it.
yeah.
I mean,
and it was all like Tron influenced and
I mean,
stuff like that. So Game Boy obviously comes out in '89. As we're going to see, like within 2 years, it's got two, theoretically at least, major competitors that will have better systems, more powerful, better graphics, color. But Nintendo won and continued to win because they were able to come at a better price point, and they were able to have a large volume of games that obviously stemmed from their NES library, at least to start, as well as that battery life. So Brian's saying like, oh, 8 hours battery life, that's okay. And certainly by modern standards, that's okay. Back then, when your competitors are getting 2 hours of battery life, it's a big game changer. And so people will take the black and white, hard to see, because obviously, this isn't modded. And what you see on the screen, this isn't on, but this is what you would see right now if you had it on. Like anybody who had one of these as a kid knows it's.
And that's one thing and honestly, that's one thing to note on every single one of these handhelds we're going to show. And that's why we're also going to talk about some better modern alternatives. Because again, might be getting the cart ahead of the horse here, but the thing is that many of these screens did not age well, and honestly, they weren't great. It's just we didn't know any better back then, and it's just you try to, I mean, and you try to play them now, they're really hard to see. Like if you don't do some type of some screen mod to these systems, they're really difficult to play, and especially like when we start talking about like Game Gear and Lynx. I mean, those screens are they're bad. I mean, I'm not sure how we thought, again, we didn't know any better, but at the time, but it's just when you look back, like how in the world do we play these? And a lot of these portable systems also suffer from bad capacitors. So, when you want to try to go back and get these, as much as I love playing on original hardware, if you're not comfortable with modding these yourself, you could have a lot of money in each one of these portable systems, getting them modded to have a more enjoyable experience with them. So just something to keep in mind.
And one good thing about modding handheld consoles, quite often you don't need to drill holes in them.
Very true. You do not.
Jab.
Though I know Operation Shutdown said we needed to celebrate and drill some holes in some. I'm all for modding consoles. Let's go. So
that's right.
So thanks
what?
everyone for the birthday.
All I'm doing when I bring it up is treating Operation Shutdown to a shot.
Hey, just before we get to the next console, I'll just let you know my thoughts on the Game Boy. You know what my thoughts on the Game Boy are? My thoughts on the Game Boy are, that's what kept my kids quiet in the back seat while I was trying to drive down the road. That's what my thoughts, because I was an adult by then, and I was a PC gamer, and handhelds, like I say, they just weren't really a thing for me up until not that I love handhelds now. Actually, we'll talk about that later because I have some interesting thoughts on that now. But back then. Nah.
Well, and again, like I said, it's just it was such a huge jump. I mean, you went from those little Tiger Direct games where like literally you had a couple little bleeps and bloops
that were absolute crap.
That looked worse than a 2600 game, and then you go to the Game Boy, and it was just such a big jump at that time.
Which was basically a black and white NES.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
So, and obviously everybody knows the story. Game Boy is popular. Tetris, Game Boy became, everybody had to have it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Tetris was the main reason people were gravitating for it.
100%.
Well,
100%.
The next handheld none of us have, and Mike wanted to touch on it, though. It's called the
Hey, no. We got two more before the one that none of us have.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
As you can see, guys, we really scripted this one well tonight.
I'm sorry. My thing scrolled up. I'm sorry. Okay. All right, Mike, you're up.
So the next comes out in 1990, and there's two. I'm going to show both of these before we go back. So I've got travel cases for both of them. The first model And this thing is a beast. This is the Atari Lynx. Now I've got, this was an add-on that you could get, but this is a screen protector / we were talking about how hard it was to see these screens. If you're outside,
Oh,
for both of my Lynx, I've got this nice little sun visor.
oh, that
You
is
can
sweet.
watch the sun. So that came out in 1990, or sorry, 1989. Same year as the Game Boy, and it was the first color handheld. But actually, here I'll compare it to the Game Boy. This thing is enormous. And then in 1991, they came out with the second model, which was vastly improved, much smaller, and much more reasonably sized.
Now, do you know if there was a difference in the battery life between the two?
There is a very slight difference in battery life. I've got the box for the second one. That one came with free Batman Returns.
Sweet.
There was a very slight battery life difference, and the newer model was better, but very slight. We're talking, you get an extra 30 minutes out of it. And that was a big killer. So this Atari, obviously seeing the Game Boy, had been working on this before the Game Boy came out. Saw the popularity of the Game Boy, launched their console, but obviously with the size of it, with the battery life absolutely sucking, it just didn't take off. And it's unfortunate because there are some absolutely great games for this. There's actually a very vibrant homebrew community for Atari Lynx. And this is again something that we're going to talk about later, but Analog, Brian and I were talking to this, just finally, like, because we pre-ordered like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago it seems, for the Analog Pocket, the adapters for Lynx and TurboGrafx are finally coming out. And so I will finally be able to review some of my Lynx games. I've already done one.
So Poe's asking if that was the one that Tobey Maguire used, the Model 2, where he did the commercial where he was sitting on the toilet. Do you remember that commercial? Yeah,
I think it's the Model 2.
Yeah, because the Model 1 didn't, I mean, it didn't, well, I guess it was there for about a year and a half or so before they
Yeah,
went to the model.
But it looks like something you'd paddle a boat with. Like, it's just this big, flat.
Honestly, it looks like a prototype still. I mean, where like the Lynx 2 was like, oh, this is what it really should have been. You know, where they rushed. And again, like in a lot of Atari fashion, like they knew, oh crap, the Game Boy's coming. We got to get this out now. And so they made it. I don't want to say rush it, but for lack of a better term, they rushed it out. And to Mike's point, it is a good console. One thing to keep in mind, even though, I mean, it don't look as much graphically per se, but it is technically a 16-bit handheld console. And
something else I'll note, you'll notice you've got buttons on the top and bottom here. This console can be used vertically and is ambidextrous. You could put it this way and then use these buttons and the D-pad if you wanted. They did think of a lot of things, but obviously Nintendo having such an established foothold, even in that first few months, and the price of this was a lot higher than the Game Boy. Like a lot of things that they had to overcome.
Yeah, the Lynx 2 finally dropped it to a point where it was competitive,
reasonable.
But yeah, the first model off the bat was like double the price, because I want to feel like it was like, was it $199 or was it $149? I can't remember, because I know the Game Boy itself was $90 when it first came out.
Yeah.
So
and I think this thing was like $199. Like it was like $200.
Right. And yeah, and you know, just same when we get into the Game Gear is just you know, Atari really suffered because it had no third party support. You know, all the third party support was with Nintendo. they were still stuck under exclusive agreements in the beginning of it. Eventually it broke off, but it wasn't until the early 90s when finally those rules got dropped and publishers could go to different consoles, where prior, so that's why they were kind of stuck on Nintendo again. And but the Lynx does have some real fun games. Like it's the only console that has the arcade ported Ninja Gaiden to it, which all the consoles, like, wow, the Lynx, I mean, a lot of good stuff that was there.
Yeah.
And what's nice is a lot of Lynx games are still very affordable. Now to get the Lynx handheld itself isn't as much in the sense of affordable anymore, but and plus again, it has a lot of problems. I mean, like it desperately needs a recap. The screen is really bad when you try to look at it today. And
Robotron.
Yep.
There we go.
Oh,
and
man.
they look cool.
Yep.
And I like the little lip that they've got there to pull them out. I've got the carrying case for it, obviously. Early homebrews that just are like basically a circuit board. If I can open this, there we go. Here's a homebrew from the 90s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have an Alien versus Predator prototype that looks like that.
Nice. But yeah, all these systems had cap problems. Like you could see in there, I've got them boxed, but I got almost the full library just sitting in. This is my travel bag for.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, there's something like 52 games for the Lynx, original games.
Yeah, it's something around.
Like
it's that. Something around that number.
But it's a lot of fun. But particularly the Lynx and the Game Gear. The Game Gear, every single one I come across. If it has audio problem, if it has video problem, it's those caps. They had really cheap, low quality capacitors for the Game Gear and for the Lynx.
Yep.
And speaking of which.
Yeah, so the next one here.
All right.
The next one here is going to be the the Game Gear, and here we go. So again, a lot more, I guess, sexier than the Lynx, and
sexier than the Game Boy too.
Yes, and I will say Sega got a bunch of things right with this one, and we can go back to all of us looking, and I'll kind of talk about it a little bit. But what's cool with this is it came out in 1990, and it's literally a portable Master System, but even a little better because it has a bigger color palette than what was on the Master System, and it had a really good lineup, and where they started to have some success with this was because the Genesis was out, and Genesis was becoming very popular, and they did pretty well there initially, but again, like the Atari Lynx, both of these handhelds, the argument could easily be made they were way ahead of their time, and because and they wanted to try because they knew, like, if we have any hope of beating Nintendo, given the monopoly they had for so long, they knew they had to go somewhere way above what a Game Boy was. But the problem is the technology at that time was hindered. I mean, with just poor backlit screens, bad capacitors. I mean, and just chewed through batteries. I mean, like that's one thing the Game Gear is atrocious for. I mean, it takes six AA batteries, and you were lucky if you got 2 hours out of them. And if you were driving in a car, it's probably more like an hour and a half. And then the six AA's are just gone.
Lots of batteries beside you if you're going on a road trip.
Right.
I remember a friend of mine getting one of these, and absolutely, like, I think he just had like Super Monaco GP or something that he got on his birthday as well. And he's playing that, and I was just absolutely blown away. If battery technology back then had been like it was now, I have zero doubt that the Game Gear would have absolutely taken over.
Oh, I fully agree, without a doubt.
Lithium.
Because at the end of the day, I mean, again, initially it was just Sega, but then like about a year into it, you started to have a bunch of other developers finally making stuff. And what we saw with the Game Gear was really a lot of what the PAL region saw with the Master System. So, a lot of those games got ported to the Game Gear because in essence, it was a portable Master System. They had very little things they had to do to tweak it. And it's an amazing console, but again, I struggle with recommending one today, to Mike's point, because you're likely on borrowed time. Even if you do get it and you turn it on and it works, if there hasn't been any type of mod work done to it or restoration work done to it, you're going to run into problems because they used horrible caps. I mean,
yeah.
And again, now if you feel comfortable doing that stuff, then it could be worth it. But by the time you pay someone to do all that, like I said, some of the things we'll talk about here later could likely be a better option for you. But I do love the Game Gear, and I just remember when I did get one finally, I didn't have the chart because again, it didn't come with a power brick, for it. So it was just batteries. And I just remember like my family, like, what do you mean it's dead already?
Yeah.
Because I literally played it and like, I didn't, like I said,
So
2
did
hours
you
max.
mention the adapter for the Master System cartridges that you could, because it actually had an adapter that
Yes,
you could
did.
you could put an adapter and play your Master System cartridges.
But the adapter was like 75% of the console itself too.
Yeah.
And we're gonna, when we get to the Nomad, we're gonna talk about that too. Like, it's a cool idea until you realize you're bringing around full-size cartridges with you everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And it is kind of ridiculous. I was gonna say that although Brian is absolutely right, every single one of these, if you get it, if it doesn't need the capacitors changing, it will need it changed very soon. I've done it on many of them. It is not the easiest system to change caps on, but I would say that you're a regular hobbyist, if you are familiar with soldering, you can do it. It's not that difficult. It's just a pain in the butt because what I actually like to do is there's a metal shield that protects the back of the screen from the cartridge. You don't need that in there. And if you remove that, it's super easy to fit. But Cannabis Kid, now that I'm actually showing something, you zoom out.
Well, wait a minute. Sorry.
Cannabis Kid was asking about the television tuner. That's the television tuner. You could watch TV on your Game Gear. No, it cannot be converted to digital, unfortunately. But it's on mine because why not? I've got like 8 of these, so I don't use this one. And actually, now that I have the Pocket, I don't use any of them. It also had, big magnifying glass things like all the consoles did. And this carry case is really cool because it actually has places for all of those accessories, including your power brick and your cigarette lighter power. And then I throw all the other games in this big, massive pocket on the outside. I love this case.
And the other thing with the Game Gear and really to a similar extent the Lynx, it was just the screen technology at that time just wasn't there either. So like you would get a lot of
fresh. I find the screen not to be that bad, but it does give you ghosting.
Yeah, I mean it has a lot of ghosting issues, and again they were way ahead of their time. I mean the technology just was not there yet for those type of screens. So and it's a shame because they are both very good handhelds, which luckily, like I said, there are modern ways to enjoy those now. So,
especially
can I say something?
Options.
Yeah, Cannabis has asked us a few times on the channel about his Game Gear needing surgery. I always said that a friend of mine used to say this, it can be done for a phenomenal fee.
I'm sure Brian would do it for you for a fee.
For a phenomenal fee.
I've done enough of them for myself that somebody came and was like, "Oh, how much would you charge me to do that?" I'm like, more than the console's worth because I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
But if you're comfortable doing it yourself, you can pick up a used Game Gear still for like 10, 15 bucks. They're cheap. Super cheap. Way cheaper than an original Game Boy. And Game Boy, I find the capacitors aren't usually the problem. It's always that damn ribbon cable.
mm-hmm. Yeah, no, the caps on the Game Boy, I mean, you don't really have as much of an issue there. Like I said, it's more the 16, or well, not 16, but 8, the color handhelds. I mean, the Lynx, the Game Gear, the Nomad, and the Turbo Express. I mean, those ones are all plagued with the same exact problems. So, but yeah, cannabis. I mean, I know someone who does that all the time with the Game Gear caps. I'll get you a contact, and I'll get you guys in touch. Because yes, I can do it, but just time wise, I mean, time wise, I don't do that many console mods on demand like that, and it's just because of just all the controller stuff that I got. I mean, I'll do it every once in a while, but I know someone who could pop it out a lot faster than I could right now. So,
yeah.
All right. Well,
now we get to talk about that one.
That I had no idea. I know nothing about. It's called the Turbo Express. It came out in 1990. Let's talk about it.
So, you guys are familiar with the TurboGrafx 16. Plays these nice little cards, right? And this is actually a handy mobile size. So NEC came out with the Turbo Express, which was a little handheld TurboGrafx 16, and it played these cards. Even when I started collecting, they ran what I considered then, at least, a fortune.
mm-hmm.
And you would pay a fortune for it and then have to get it or have to mod it yourself. Not even necessarily mod it, but like recap it. Guaranteed, when you got it, it would be dead. Beautiful idea. Again, way ahead of its time. If it had worked, it would have been like the Switch.
Right.
Because you can use it at home on your TV, or you can plug it into your Turbo Express and play it there. And Miss Cannabis Kid said somebody did get digital TV to work on their Game Gear. That person has way too much time on their hands. Probably had to gut the whole interior, but that's really cool that they did that. But yeah, this is a fantastic idea, just ahead of its time.
Yeah. No, I mean, I really like the concept, but like you said, price point's just so astronomical at this point. And even when it released,
even then it was like twice what a Game Gear was.
Right. I think
it twice what a Game Boy was.
I mean, I want to say because I always wanted a TurboGrafx when it came out, but like the pricing of everything was just like, no, because I'm going to get a Genesis instead that has a lot more stuff. But I feel
wish
like
I had bought one. Me balking at it was probably like $200.
I was gonna say, I swore it started out at like $249, which back then was absolutely crazy when you think about what that is today. You know what I mean? For that.
Oh yeah.
So
I'm talking like when I was balking at the price 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, right.
It was probably $200 that I was balking at. Now they're God knows what.
Okay, well, sounds to me like we're mic's
we're
up.
Moving on. So, hey, we can play console games on a mobile. Sega can as well. The Sega Nomad. Plagued with all the same problems that the Game Boy had. Bad capacitors and all that. Except now you get even worse battery life. And you get to cart big, massive cartridges around. I have actually never played this with the battery pack. I always plug it in when I did play it. The screen has the same ghosting problems as the Game Gear has. Really cool idea. Looks great. Decent size. Like if you were going somewhere and you'd wanted to bring like 2 or 3 Genesis carts with you, like it's not a bad idea, but you have to plug in. And the screen, again, it's not the best experience, especially for that blast processing where you got Sonic zooming around the screen. You know, he's going to look like he's here, 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 and here, as opposed to gently rolling across the screen. That low battery light right at the top, that's going to be on all the time. But I really do like it. And it does have, using the standard Genesis cables, my lights here are not very good, video out. You could plug this into a TV and use this as your controller. So for the time, really well thought out. This came out in 1995. So obviously Genesis is at the end of its life. We're already into the stage of 32X, CD add-on Tower of Power BS. So Sega on their last legs. Great idea. Just, again, the tech. And the tech was better then, but at the same time, Sega wasn't able to put the funds into it that they probably should have to make it a success. But even then, this thing would have cost an absolute fortune if they had done it right, even for 1995 standards.
And the thing to keep in mind too, that this was literally only in the US. Like, that was not even in, like, the Nomad itself, I do not believe was ever released anywhere else but in the US.
I believe it was released in Japan. I'm not sure. It might only be US.
Let me look real quick. Because, yeah, for some reason I'm thinking it was, it was only released in North America. So
okay.
Yeah, so I mean, it was based off of the Mega Jet, which was in Japan on airlines. You know, the play Genesis.
That's what I'm
games.
thinking of.
Yeah. So, but because again, the American market, you know, Sega was trying to get every last juice, squeezing as much as they could to get every little drop out of the.
And this was also at the time that Sega Japan and Sega America were not getting along, and we're kind of going two different routes.
Yep. So, but no, I mean, again, it was a cool concept, but again, it's just the technology just wasn't there, and you know, and saying that the technology wasn't there, you know, where that would have really been amazing. But again, if it wasn't there in 95, it wouldn't have been ready in like 92. Because again, when you think about like when you had the Turbo Express, I mean, if they could have brought that out when, again, maybe not every household had a bunch of televisions. So the fact that I could plug it into my TV when I'm allowed to be in the living room TV, but then when it's time to, okay, parents are watching TV, I can unplug it and sit in my bedroom and
again,
have
just
it plugged in.
Switch.
Right.
Yep.
So, but again, they couldn't get the technology there in 95. They probably wouldn't have been able to pull it off sooner than that. Anyway,
yeah. And so we're moving to the next one, which is really a brief one. But so in the same year, 1 year after this comes out, okay, Sega's throwing everything. They got the Game Gear, which is an advanced color system. They've got the Nomad. You're playing 16-bit Genesis games, mobile. Nintendo, what do? In 1996, a year after the Nomad, they take this exact thing and just make it smaller.
And got rid of the spinach screen, though. Got rid of the spinach screen, though.
You're right. Okay, so not this exact thing. Now it's a little more gray as opposed to green.
And larger.
And bigger screen.
There's still no backlight. They just made it smaller, a little bit bigger screen. Battery life is better. But aside from that, they are still riding this horse. And why not? Because this thing, combined with this thing, just absolutely was wrecking everything that anybody else could throw at it. Even at this point in time. So 1996, Nintendo still has not graduated to color. But 2 years later, we could go to Brian, unless you guys have something to say about the Pocket. Nintendo finally decides to enter color.
Yep. And with that, yeah, we get the Game Boy Color. And But here's the funny part, again, back to what Mike was saying with the Pocket. We can go back to the three of us now. That ultimately,
No backlit screen.
we still don't have a backlit screen, and
But we do have cool clear, because this is the era of the Nintendo 64 where you gotta have those see-through controllers.
right. And now one thing I will say though that some people don't realize though with the Game Boy Color. So like if you would get Game Boy Color games, so those are the ones that were usually the black cart. Those looked great. Even though again no backlit screen, which made them kind of hard to see. They were very colorful and good. And then it was backward compatible, so you could play your regular Game Boy games. But man, that was real hit and miss. I mean, because one, you went back to a smaller screen, because again, the Pocket gave you a bigger screen. They went back to a smaller screen for the color, and depending on the palette, the game could look absolutely horrible if it was not designed for Game Boy Color. So for example, if you want to put it back on me, Phil, here, I'm going to see, I don't know if the camera will pick it up. We'll try it. So again, this is another modded screen. But again, if I just pop it in Bubsy 2, I don't know if it's going to focus. Come on.
It's lighted pretty decent.
There we go.
I mean, that's what it looks like.
It's supposed to be orange.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's kind of hard to see, but it's like greens and blues right now, which is bad. And it just, those experiences weren't great. But now something I don't know that everyone knows about is that there's different palette sets that when you boot up the Game Boy, you hit different button combinations to actually change the palette. So I know personally, if I'm using a Game Boy Color and I got just a regular Game Boy game, I like to hit left and B, because if I go ahead and do that here again, we want to go full screen. So if I go ahead and start this and I hit left and B, it now changed it to black and white. So now it's literally like the Game Boy Pocket screen in the palette tone. So now everything looks a lot better because again, those games that were not set up for that just, weren't. That was the downfall of the Game Boy Color. It was great you had backward compatibility, but if you didn't understand about those palette choices, you had some pretty ugly experiences with it. But with that said, though, I mean, this thing lasted clear, like, what, 2001, 2002, I think? Even longer.
2001 before it was, before the Advance came out. But one thing I will note, too, because the cartridges are the same size and they would fit in either, original Game Boy games have a little, you'll notice in the cartridge, they have a little notch cut out of the top. And that was for this. So if I cover my face here.
Would you do that more?
Yeah.
I mean, more often.
When you put the power on, that was supposed to lock the cartridge in, right? Mm-hmm. So they had the little, so that you couldn't pull it out while you were playing. What they did is they eliminated that notch in the Game Boy Color cartridges. So you could put it into your Game Boy, but you couldn't turn your Game Boy on with a Game Boy Color, because Game Boy would not play Game Boy Color, but Game Boy Color would play Game Boy.
Okay. All right, Brian. You have Neo Geo Pocket.
Yeah, so this came out in the same year as the Game Boy Color, and this was SNK's solution to the portable market, the Neo Geo Pocket Color. And in essence, it was a lot like a Game Boy Pocket, did not have a backlit screen. But one of the things that was nice about it is just, I like the form factor of this a little better. And also with SNK being big on arcade style controls, it was almost like a little mini joystick here that was very, very clicky. I don't know if you can hear that okay.
Yes, we can hear. Good.
I love the Neo Geo little clicky thumbstick.
Yeah. I mean, and this was a really, really fun console. And we can go back to the three of us. That I actually bought this day one because at the time I had my Dreamcast, and all the news things were big on, we're going to get a Sonic the Hedgehog game for it, which we did, and it's a good Sonic the Hedgehog game. because at this point Sega was kind of done with portables, so they supported the Neo Geo Pocket with a couple games. And also there was a link that you could connect this to your Dreamcast for certain games for extra functionality. So, but yeah, I bought this on day one and I had a blast with it. And again, I would have preferred it to be backlit, initially by then. But again, the price point that it came in at was very aggressive. I mean, I think I paid $80 for it when it first came out, which was not bad at all. And great ports of Pac-Man, Bust a Move, a lot of the Metal Slugs, a lot of the SNK core titles that you saw on Neo Geo, they had portable versions of, and they were all really fun. I think it's a very underappreciated system, which I think there's become more popularity for it, because I do know that these are a lot more expensive to come by nowadays. So,
well, because back then they weren't particularly popular,
right?
Which is a shame, because Neo Geo in the arcade, like everybody loved that stuff. But I think what they like in the early 90s with the AES, and then the mid 90s with the Neo Geo CD that had the single speed disc reader and stuff, just price themselves way out of the market. So by the time it comes to 1998 and the release is Pocket and is reasonably priced and it's got access to this great library, nobody's thinking Neo Geo for home use.
And again, it did not last long here in the States. I think it only had a shelf life of about 1.5 years, 2 years tops, I think. So I don't even know if it did. Yeah, I think that's about right. I'd have to double check.
I never remember seeing it on the shelves up here in Canada anyway.
So yeah, I ended up getting it at Electronics Boutique at the time, which now is obviously a GameStop. But I think it was only like 1.5 years, and then they already started fire sailing it because they didn't have the library or support. Like everything was being made by SNK, or Sega put 1 or 2 games, I believe, out for it. So
Operation Shutdown should take another shot, because Retro Bliss is scolding somebody for mentioning Pac-Man on the 2600. I just wanted to note in the comments, Cannabis Kid mentioned that there was a sewing machine company that teamed up with Nintendo for a sewing machine that used the Game Boy Color. It was actually an embroidery machine, but yes, Game Boy, the whole range of Game Boy systems, including the Advance, they had so many accessories. There's a camera, there was a printer, there was you could hook it up to an embroidery machine. There are people who use it for MIDI music. And we're going to be, well, actually, are you done with the Pocket, or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think unless there's any questions or anything else we want to comment on. Like I said, I think it was good. It was just ultimately at the end of the day, it just didn't have Game Boy was so rampant at that point that it just didn't have a chance. So
yeah. And again, coming out the same year as a new Game Boy with color.
Right. Right. I mean, at the end of the day, if they could have gotten
before,
yes,
they probably would have done a lot better.
I would agree with that completely.
Yeah. But so the Game Boy Color having come out in 1998, we were 3 years away from Game Boy's new system, and that was the Game Boy Advance. And I remember being pretty hyped for this one, because this was my first handheld console that I owned. My little brothers, because I didn't have a Game Boy. My little brother had a Game Boy, so when we went on road trips, he got to play Pokemon and whatever, and I was too old for Pokemon anyway. But still, I would steal it and play some Tetris sometimes. But this one was the first one that was mine, and I was in college at the time. But so again. Kind of how handhelds, at least with Nintendo, work is, their handheld systems kind of reflect their past gaming systems. And the Game Boy Advance, for all intents and purposes, is a Super Nintendo, at least graphically. And so you'll see a lot of ports for Super Nintendo games. Maybe not specifically, but Super Nintendo franchises like Mario Kart. Game Boy Advance is where you see the first mobile Mario Kart. And then 2 years later, they finally did what they should have done about 3 generations of mobile previously. And they come out with the SP that has built-in lighted screen. It has a nice little,
rechargeable battery finally.
Yes. So you press that little button and this screen lights up and it is brilliant. And this is actually my favorite.
I got one too. Oh.
Well, it's the same color. This is my favorite way to play. I'm actually not a big fan of these ones. Like they're okay, but I like this feel better. There's solid system. The great thing about Game Boy Advance is it is backwards compatible, and they kept that. So the fact that they were able to do that with Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance, you can play all of them on this. And the fact that they even thought of that and kept that, because the form factor vertically of the Game Boy Advance games is much different. But the fact that you're able to do that, I absolutely adore. And that makes, well, actually, in a future episode, we're going to continue, because this is kind of where we're going to stop with handhelds, aside from talking about some newer ones that you can play retro games on. But there is only one more system after this that has a slot like this. And I was actually very pleased that they had that when that came out too. Mm-hmm. But 100% the Advance SP is the one you want to get if you're going for retro hardware for this. They had lots of different, I think I brought it up already. Or did I put it down there? I can't see it. There was a wireless adapter for this that would clip on. You had different connection cables. You were able to connect your Game Boy Advance to, actually it's on the back of one of these, this box right here. You were able to connect it and use it as a controller on your GameCube. Zelda Four Swords is a game that you can literally play with multiple Game Boy Advances connected to. And it's a pretty neat game if you've got that accessory. And speaking of GameCube.
Zoom out.
Yeah, as soon as you zoom out, that's okay. Right down here, the Game Boy Player. These are actually really common. It will play Game Boy. It will play Game Boy Color. It will play Game Boy Advance. What is less common is the disc for it. These get lost all the time. So if you get one of these, it requires the disc to play. There are ways to get around it. Like if you've got a modded GameCube, then you can have a modded BIOS that will run that. It is far from perfect, but especially when it first came out, it was the best way to play Game Boy games on a television, for sure. I still do it. I've actually got a modded Super Nintendo controller with a GameCube connector that I use to play Game Boy Advance games, and it's brilliant. It's like playing Super Nintendo.
And a couple things to note, because one, it's just kind of crazy when you think about it. Is this? So again, that was 2001 when we finally got the Game Boy Advance.
In 2003, before they decided to put a goddamn light in it.
Right. So, I mean, the crazy thing is that for the longest time, I mean, we're talking now Dreamcast, PlayStation 2 era, and we're still playing with 8-bit portables. You know, yep. And that's why I think when the Game Boy Advance happened, everyone was so excited because it's like, oh my God, we're finally getting to go to 16-bit.
It was the first real big leap.
Right.
For Nintendo, because like Game Boy Color, it was the same graphics, it's just in color.
Yes.
This was an actual enhancement.
Yes. And again, there was a couple of machines that we showed that were better, but they weren't mainstream enough that they even really put a dent into things. And I mean, because even like the Game Gear, that was still 8-bit. And obviously you had the Turbo Express and the Nomad, but those were so few and far between that you can't really count those as being true.
And also, Nintendo continued with having their good price point.
Right.
That in the mobile market, that was always huge. Like as soon as Nintendo entered the mobile market in 1999, they never gave it up.
Yep.
To this day, even though the 3DS, the new 3DS, like all the 3DS line and DS line is dead, the Switch counts as their mobile market. Like you got a Switch Lite, that's a mobile console.
Yep.
They still own that market, and they have owned it for 30 years, 35 years now.
And then one thing I want to show with the Game Boy Advance, because I think it's just a neat contraption. I mean, it's not practical. It really wasn't, but it was just neat. And this was the e-reader for the Game Boy Advance. So, it was a very neat concept for its time. I forget how much the e-reader itself cost, because this is actually still my original one from growing up. And with that, it was just very.
I mean, it's got to show the cards.
It's very cool because. Again, you could buy the packs of cards, which I think the cards were only like $4 or $5 at the time. Nothing like dramatic, but it was like going old school, loading a PC game from Windows 95, where like you had all the 3.5-inch floppies because instead you had all these cards. So if you wanted to load Urban Champion to play on the e-reader, you would have to swipe each one of these cards in the correct order. So card 1 of 5, 2 of 5, and they're labeled on the back. And once you swiped them all, it would literally have that. It would load that game to be able to play it. So it was
such a ridiculous concept, really. It's like, hey, let's take a credit card reader and throw it on the bottom of this system.
Right.
But I've never heard of that. That's interesting.
But in ways, that was like your only way to get some of these classic Nintendo games for now. I think like I think they re-released a couple on the Advance, but I mean, again, these were the way to get those classic games. And like I got a couple because I actually have every single one. So
I have a few of them, but I've never opened them because I don't want to.
Yeah, I got them open. Like I don't know how I actually told myself to keep these wrappers when I bought them, but I like literally just
for doing it.
I mean, I just literally slightly cut the tops just enough to like keep them in there and go. But again, it's just it was like cool. Play Excite Bike, and again, it was just a very cheap way to do it.
And they were all small games that came with the e-reader. They weren't big. Like you weren't playing Mario Kart Super Circuit.
Oh no, not at all. I mean,
Donkey Kong.
But like you'd have like the little Game and Watch, like you could load for it. I don't remember what this was for because I didn't play Pokemon at the time, but they had little special Pokemon cards you could swipe that had to do something with the games. Even Animal Crossing had a swipe to it, and then this was like a freebie you pick up at stores for like to get air hockey. So you just literally went and packed. And at the time I might have grabbed a few little extras. So, but again, it was just a cool concept at the time. I mean, it's not practical in any way, shape, or form. But the fact that they were wanting to even give that a shot, I think, is just neat. So,
and the fact that if you lost card 3 of 5,
oh, you're done for.
I'd be ticked.
Oh yeah, but this was probably the biggest part of it right here because I got the whole set of them. Is like so like they had these cards that think of it as amiibos for this game. I mean, you would literally be able to swipe in the e-reader and get special abilities right on the fly with this. And like I said, I was able to collect a whole set at the time. So, yeah, cool. Again, it's a neat little piece of history there that, again, not practical, but still neat nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I don't know if we've got time to go in any further.
I think we can give it 10 minutes. We can go 5 minutes over.
Okay. All right. Well, I haven't contributed a whole lot. That's why I have Bubsy behind me. I figured I'd contribute in one way or another. I did want to show that I also have a Game Boy Advance also. Mine's a cooler color than yours. But
Wait a second.
Yours is like a clear.
Yeah, no, that's a clear one, but the one in the box,
Yeah.
Oh no, it's the same color.
Yeah, loser. Okay.
All right,
Anyway.
fine. You're floor.
Okay. I want to show a couple things that I have and how I got kind of started getting into handhelds as a later on just recently. Okay, so for me, what I've done when I started getting back into retro gaming, I first started getting into retro gaming into the Atari 2600, and so I was watching a lot of YouTube, and I saw, and I originally got into it like a flashback, and then when I was YouTubing flashback, I saw a flashback portable, so I got one of these little flashback portables, and the flashback portable has SD card reader. This particular one, there are different ones that do not. And I can't remember. I've got the box over there, and I forgot to look at which model. But this one has an SD card reader on there, and you can load games on there and play. Add your ROMs to it and play on the go. Now, the buttons on there are really mushy. The screen is not great. The sound is not great. The gameplay is not all that great. But it's something, you know. And it was kind of a fix, just something to do. So later on, I started looking into it, and I ended up getting, as some of you may know, I got me an arcade stick that was hooked up to a Raspberry Pi, and I started researching Raspberry Pis, and I found a Raspberry Pi handheld. And I got this. It's called a Pi Boy DMG. And it's in the exact same housing size as the original Game Boy. The speaker is in the same location. The screen is obviously bigger, as you can see. Now, obviously there are more buttons there. But it has a... I'm sorry, messing up here. It has an analog stick. It has the D-pads, and then it has the 6 action buttons here. But what they did was they attempted to put some shoulder buttons on the back. But I soon found out that the position of them when you're trying to hold it in your hand and you're trying to play, they don't work too well. But this was their first attempt. But there's actually a Raspberry Pi 4B inside. And what's really neat about this is, well, first of all, it's got a HDMI, a Raspberry Pi 4B has 2 HDMI outs. One is taken up by the screen inside, but they have the screen such that they have one that is on the side here that you can hook up to a TV, and on the end here you can put a controller. So as you can see, I have a little dongle there that goes to this, and I have a couple of them. I just hook them up to a TV, and we can go at it and play. And I have 16,000 games on this bad boy. And we can play, like if we go on a trip or whatever, if we're in a hotel room, I could just hook it up to a TV in the hotel room, and we can.
Games that you legally own, right, Phil?
All 16,000, absolutely. So, and so I thought, so I thought I would show you that, and then the only other things that I wanted to show you. What'd you just say?
Oh.
Okay. Anyway. So my wife, she loves Pac-Man. She loves Pac-Man.
Particularly the 2600 version.
I'm about ready to kick you. So I got her, and I thought, see, the thing of it is, I can buy these things, review them for the channel, and then give them to her, right? So I got them and actually reviewed this for the channel, but then I gave it to her. Was this little My Arcade Pac-Man. I have a green screen, so it's kind of looking kind of funky. But the only problem is it has the NES version of Pac-Man. It's not the arcade version. And it's the same thing for this, which I got. She likes Miss Pac-Man, so I got her the Miss Pac-Man version. But they're kind of neat. They're kind of cool, And then I saw this it was cheap. It's still my arcade. I haven't. It's brand new in box. I've never opened it. And when I saw it, it said 220 games on it, and I thought they were. It says retro games, but I thought it said arcade games. But then when I looked on it, there are no games that I've ever even heard of.
I was gonna say they're probably a bunch of like 8 versions of a Chinese hack or something.
Yeah, you know? And I've never even opened the box, so I don't know what I'm gonna do with this.
Kind of like what you find when you go on AliExpress for those like 250 in one Nintendo carts and stuff. I'm sure it's very similar.
But it's a My Arcade product. It's a My Arcade product, which made me think that it was going to be, and it's probably not a bad little thing. I may give it away or something on the channel. I don't know. It's brand new. It's never been opened, but anyway, so that's my contribution to the show.
Well, I guess I'll show the because I know Mike has the one also, so I'll let him show that one. But like, I guess I'll just kind of show another thing is just you know, when it gets in the modern, and you know, this could be almost for another show in itself, but you know, what Mike's showing is definitely what Mike's going to show is definitely the best. I mean, it's the most expensive, but it's also the best solution that we're going to be showing for this stuff. But I also have a real strong place for the Evercade, and you know, this is the original Evercade model. And it's just a real neat concept because you know, it does do retro gaming. You know, it has its own cartridges that are like collections of different games and stuff that are in it. Very affordable. I mean, the games come in a nice clamshell box with manual and the cart. And you know, this was the original model. You know, since the original, they've made the EXP model, which is a much better screen on it, and
you can flip it vertical.
And you can flip it for like the different shmups and stuff. But I don't have any with me, but I know they recently did those little pocket cade things with like the Capcom and the Taito stuff, which is very affordable option. But I just like the concept of Evercade because yes, there's other ways you can do this stuff, but like, I mean, what I really like is the fact that they got indie games. Like, they literally have compilations of homebrews where, I mean, these are 2 as an example where, I mean, each one of these are $20 a pop. And like, you know, when you think about homebrew games and indie games, where are you going to get 14 physical homebrew? You know, granted, it's all on one cart, but where are you going to get that many homebrews for $20? And that's the one thing I really like about the Evercade, that they're really making it.
In addition to the mobile, there is an actual console version as well, where you can put two of these carts in. It's almost impossible to get the bloody controllers for it, but you can use other controllers. And I would anyway, because, but definitely great to cheaply play a large amount of retro games if you still want to go physical. Obviously, something like what Phil has with his Pi Boy is the cheapest. But if you want to still collect, you could buy every single release from Evercade every year and still not break the bank.
And I'm guilty of that. I have a complete set so far.
Yeah, I'm missing some. I found I wasn't playing it as much as I thought I would. So I was collecting all of them, and at a certain point, I just started collecting the ones I wanted. But it isn't like, it's not the type of system to break the bank. The other system that Brian was referring to is the Analog Pocket. So this cartridge slot here will take your Game Boy Color, your Game Boy Advanced, and coming soon, even though I ordered it at the same time I ordered this, and I got this thing late, like it was 2 years ago when I ordered this thing at least. Cartridge adapters for Atari Lynx and Game Gear, and for the TurboGrafx 16 cards.
And Lynx.
Nice.
I said Lynx first.
Neo Geo Pocket. That's
and Neo Geo Pocket.
I knew there was one missing there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's got the bumpers here,
which are in a better position.
Beautiful face buttons. D-pad, no thumbstick, but the screen on this is beautiful. I don't even know if it'll turn on without a game in there. Probably will.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also got the dock with mine, so you can plug this into the dock, and then it's like plugging your Switch into a dock. You can play these mobile games on the TV. So a big reason I'm looking forward to that adapter is then I could plug this into the dock with the adapter, play my Link's homebrews, and capture footage to do proper reviews on them. So
now the only thing, and maybe you know because you do it more, is I would say the one thing with the dock though to keep in mind, at least whenever I did Game Gear and Game Boy stuff, there's really no filtering to it. So when you're playing it on a big screen, it could get ugly. I mean, like like I put it on.
I found it looked crisp, but since we're talking about that, this is how I capture all of my Game Boy footage. So I've done a few Game Boy and Game Boy Color. It's called the GB Operator. I actually learned about this from a channel that I'm a fan of called Go Game Go. He did a little
game
video.
Go Jeff.
Yeah, so it's like $60 for this. It's by Epilogue, the GB Operator. It's just this little thing. And with a USB, you plug it into your computer, and it's got a emulator that'll run, and you plug a cartridge into this, and you just play it on your computer as if it was anything else. Yeah, so I just play it with this, and I have captured. So if you look back at any of my Game Boy Color reviews, I captured the footage with this, and it is so unbelievably easy. You literally plug it in, open the app, and just say run cartridge. And it'll also analyze the cartridge. It'll tell you if it's a fake. It'll tell you if it's not registered. Like, obviously, I'm playing lots of homebrews, so it's like this is not a register. It'll tell you if the cartridge is rewritable, because a lot of games will use carts that they can just flash. It'll tell you lots of different stuff about it. So for $60, $70, worth absolutely every penny. I love this thing.
Very nice.
But yeah, to the point of the pocket, and because I know we're kind of out of time, but I mean, again, unless you just absolutely got to have these original consoles, and unless you're comfortable with doing some modifications on your own, I mean, the price tag on the analog pocket initially is kind of like, yeah, but it's worth its weight in gold. I mean, the screen, like Mike said, it's beautiful, it's big. I mean, like, we're all getting old. Who wants to look at that tiny of a screen when you got that big of a screen? I mean, it's just at the end of the day, it really is a no-brainer to consider an analog pocket. And again, if you're into portable gaming for the physical carts and things like that, I mean, it's definitely worth it. And then it also has an SD card slot in it. Micro SD, to be able to, because again, there's other FPGA cores you can put on it. So there's a lot of side loading you can do. I mean, you can have original carts, or you can, do some side loading there. Just do a couple YouTube searches and you can find it all. But
not hard to do it all.
Right. And again, it's just, to me, I think the analog pocket, even though I know a lot of people or I don't want to say hating on analog right now just because of ship times and different things lately, but I mean, it is a very, very good piece of hardware, and I do think it is, like, to today's standard, the best way to play original carts when you're in the portable gaming market.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're about done now. There was one other thing I forgot to show you guys. It only took me a second. There is a way, shut up. There's a way for people to play their retro games on their phones. And I have an iPhone, and iPhones are very tough, and I'm not going to show on the channel, at least right now. But I have a bracket. And my phone, my Xbox controller is green, so it's showing real funny on, but and it's not paired. So, but I have RetroArch on my phone, and all the games are loaded on the phone, and I can load through RetroArch and then just pair my Xbox controller to my phone and play whatever game I want to. And the screen on the iPhone is large. I have a 15, and it's very large, and it's kind of hard to beat the screen. I don't know of anything that's any better than an iPhone 15 screen. You know, when I go places, like as much as I've had to take my folks to the hospital and go places or whatever, I take it everywhere. I just take it everywhere I go, and that's what I do now. When I have to go out and I want to get my fix, I just throw it in the just throw the controller in the bracket in the pocket, because it just pops off like that, and just throw, you know, take this with me. That's it. So, all right, guys. Well, listen, hey, I appreciate you guys as always. You guys are amazing. And I want to let you guys know about next week. I'm really excited about next week. Tentatively, we have John Champeau from Champ Games. Now, the only thing is, he's only available between 5 and 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so it won't be the 8 o'clock normal time. But he will be on the Retro Bliss Rewind show next week at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So you won't want to miss that. He's tentatively agreed to do that. So we're really excited to have him on. And as always, everybody that's watched, I appreciate you guys watching. And again, you guys are my rocks. I appreciate you guys being here. So with that, we'll see you next time on Retro Bliss Rewind. Take care, guys. Bye.
Yeah.